Hello and welcome to NETEC's webinar, Estimating PPE Needs Using the DASH Tool for Special Pathogens Readiness. We're glad you're here with us today. All right, for those of you not familiar with NETEC, we are a partnership for preparedness. We work to set the gold standard for special pathogen preparedness and response across health systems in the US, with the goals of driving best practices, closing knowledge gaps like this one, and developing innovative resources with our partners. The Regional Emerging Special Pathogens Treatment Centers are now a consortium of 13 healthcare centers across the United States, and the contacts for those regional healthcare systems are here on this slide. And they are there for your assistance and to help you in your own preparedness journey. NETEC has 4 primary areas of focus: consultation and assessment, which helps facilities gauge their own readiness for special pathogens events. We also have education and training, which obviously helps us do things like today's webinar. We also have an online repository, exercise templates available on our website. We have a research network that built a central IRB for the rapid implementation of clinical research protocols, as many of us found out very important in new pathogen events. And we also have international partnerships. This is a worldwide sport, and it helps to know what's happening in other parts of the world. So we are grateful for our international partners as well. All right, so today I am Jill Morgan. I'm a nurse at Emory University Hospital. I was part of our Ebola response, and now I'm the site manager for our biocontainment unit. We're going to do a very brief overview of really what kind of PPE we're talking about. Then we're going to talk about how much you need and how you figure those things out. So I will do this first section, and then we're going to dive right into the DASH tool. And I'm really happy to have with us Dr. John Hick, and I'll do more of an introduction for him later. And then 2 folks from some of those regional treatment centers, Sarah Haroth from University of Minnesota Medical Center and Brooke Henriksen from Spokane Sacred Heart, who are going to walk us through some scenarios so you guys can see what the DASH tool looks like in real life and with some real life scenarios. And then we have had some questions that y'all submitted ahead of time, which we're very grateful for. We'll get to as many of those as we can. And if questions come up, please, again, use the Q&A tool at the bottom of your screen to submit those questions as we go. All right, so we're going to dive into this and talk about sort of the overview of what PPE we're talking about for special pathogens patients. I think it's important to just start with a level playing field here. What we're talking about is how important it is to understand transmission routes, risk, and appropriate protection levels. So that means that each facility has to choose the items, develop those items into an ensemble, and then create donning and doffing processes that aren't always so intuitive, because you have to know what your infrastructure, what the rest of your hierarchy of controls looks like in order to make sure that you're planning the right PPE. And then where you do each step. So creating your donning and doffing processes will also be required to know, where am I taking this piece off? Am I taking it all off here? Where am I doing that? And then you're going to test those methods and train to them. Many of us who are doing this now for a living have altered our ensembles, because as we test and train, we discover that folks struggle with one step or another. So it's really important that you go through that entire process, making sure you're getting the right pieces that meet the standards and protect folks in the way that they're needed to be protected, and then develop an entire ensemble that meets the guidelines, create the processes, and then make sure that your staff are able to tolerate it and do those steps. So what kind of PPE are we talking about, and how do we arrive at some of these numbers? So I think stepping back and saying, okay, how many staff members would we really put in PPE at one time? What kind of staff members? Would we have multiple people in a room at a time? So at each episode, having a patient, how many people would need to be in the room? How many patients might you have? I think it's easy to say we would only be able to take 1 patient at a time. but we know from our emergency departments that sometimes whole families get sick. So you might have a group of people that come in all together. What kind of patient? What we mean by that is it a pediatric patient who already might need 2 staff members in order to be safely handled? Do you have a patient who's delirious or febrile and altered? Do you have a patient who's critically ill? Those decisions are very different than somebody who can walk in and basically be a worried well patient. You think about how long your staff can remain in PPE. We've seen people come for training, put on the PPE ensemble that was assigned to them by their facility, and be unable to tolerate, whether from heat or discomfort, even for the time it takes to complete donning and do a single clinical skill. So making sure that your PPE ensemble is safe for your staff to wear. Then you want to think about how many donning and doffing events would there be per day? If my staff can stay in PPE for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, we don't see many facilities that plan on going more than 4 hours in PPE. That's a long time. So then figuring out, okay, if people could only stay in 2 hours, how long would they need to do this? How many times would we be changing staff over? And then thinking about who all is wearing this PPE. Providers, nursing. Would lab ever come into your room? Would EVS ever come into your room? What about respiratory therapy or getting a chest x-ray? Kind of deciding what kind of care you're going to be able to extend to a patient, how you would accomplish that, and who all would be involved. Not everybody might not need to wear the same PPE if their risk profile is different. So thinking about if somebody else isn't going to be in the room and actually having patient contact, could they be in a lesser level of PPE? Big conversations to be having with your IP, with your emergency department staff, with your ED providers. And all of this, we think, is a good idea, whether you're covered as a Joint Commission accredited agency or not. It is now, as of July 2024, a requirement. Joint Commission accredited hospitals to develop and implement protocols for high consequence infectious disease patients to be ready for those special pathogens events. That preparedness requirement includes donning and doffing protective equipment, infection control, waste handling, and really making sure your staff are comfortable and confident in that PPE. That extends to every level of what we now think of as NSPS, the National Special Pathogen System of Care. So we have regional emerging special pathogens treatment centers, as we mentioned earlier and showed the map. Then we have level 2 special pathogens treatment centers in the process of being named and identified, level 3 assessment centers, and then level 4 is really every other healthcare facility, because we know whether you're ready or not, whether you have designated yourself or not, patients can present anywhere at any time. So there are different capabilities outlined in the NSPS. This is a very brief version, but there are longer versions available on the NSPS and NETEC websites. So the capability for how long you would deliver care, how many patients, and then what kind of PPE supply you need to think about having. So for instance, as level 1 facilities, Sarah, Brooke, and I have the obligation of caring for at least 2 VHF cases for at least 7 days on site, plans to support for 21 days of care. That's a lot of PPE. I couldn't keep all of that on site. I have an offsite warehouse where I can keep more PPE. So thinking about what your capacity would be. And I would say that while it's not on this slide, a level 4 facility still needs to think about how long it would take to put everything in place, even if they're going to transfer that patient out. You may end up with a patient, depending on transport and other logistics in your region, greater than 12 or 24 hours before you have acceptance and you have a mode of transportation and the patient's been stabilized for transport. So thinking about what your PPE needs will be and what kind and how many patients you might have. So that's the start of the data inputs that you need to think about in order to use the dash tool. All right, so what does our PPE look like? So we think about the ability to have for a wet VHF patient. So this is a patient that is either clinically unstable or has nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea, fever, and has screened positive in a travel screen. You have three basic choices in ensembles, depending on what supplies you have available to you at your institution. The PPE ensemble on the left is an N95 ensemble, so an NIOSH-approved N95 or elastomeric respirator, a fluid-resistant head and neck cover, full face shield, a level 3 or 4 gown, a level 4 gown or a ASTM F1670-1671 coverall, shoe and boot covers, and 2 pairs of gloves, the outer at least extended cuff. The middle ensemble is one with a PAPR or powered air purifying respirator with an external motor. And that is going to have the PAPR, a level 4 gown or coverall, shoe and boot covers, and of course the 2 pairs of gloves shown there with a gown on top as well. The internal motor PAPR ensemble on your right has the internal motor, of course, on the inside of their coverall, and then the level 4 gown, coverall, shoe and boot covers, and 2 pair of gloves, extended cuff, with again a gown or apron on the outside. If your patient is dry and still just a suspect case, in other words, you do not have confirmatory testing, they're not having active vomiting, diarrhea, and they're, for instance, able to toilet themselves and things like that, where you are not having to be, as we would say in nursing, all up in there, then you can wear a lesser protective ensemble. This is what the guidance is for dry or suspect patients, and that is a full face shield, a mask or respirator, a level 3 or 4 fluid-resistant gown, AME level 3 or 4, and then again, 2 pair of gloves, the outer pair with extended cuffs. Shoe and boot covers are optional unless you're in California, in which case they are required as part of this ensemble. Some of our pathogens, of course, as special pathogens, are novel respiratory. So we think about this being a MERS or a SARS one. This could be a highly pathogenic influenza, not avian influenza unless it moves to be human influenza, but a highly pathogenic influenza, or one of the other new emerging pathogens that we don't even know about yet. But again, this is sort of more like what I would call our COVID PPE. So a full face shield or goggles, a respirator, a gown, and gloves. Or of course, you can wear a PAPR as well. And those PAPRs for respiratory pathogen do not have to have the full hood. All right, so we've sort of outlined quickly 3 ensembles to think about, 3 different kinds of ensembles to think about. And I want you to be thinking about what kind of PPE you have at your facility as we start to think about how we're going to do all these, the math, if you will, of figuring out how much PPE we need to have at our facility. All right, I am so thrilled to introduce to you Dr. John Hick. John Hick is a faculty emergency physician at Hennepin Healthcare and a professor of emergency medicine at the University of Minnesota Medical School. John also works as an advisor to the National Hospital Preparedness Program and is lead editor of the ASPR Technical Resources Assistance Center and Information Exchange, what we know as TRACIE, website. So he is intimately involved in many things that have to do with this type of planning, and we're grateful for his expertise and assistance in talking about the DASH tool today. So welcome, John. Thanks for being here with us.
Well, thanks for having me, Jill. Next slide, please. So we're going to talk a little bit about PPE needs and using the DASH tool, and you'll see a demonstration of that later on. But I want to just intro the DASH tool a little bit and some of the other capabilities that it has. Next slide, please. First, I want to just mention ASPR TRACIE. If you're not familiar with us, ASPR TRACIE stands for Technical Resources, Assistance Center, and Information Exchange. So within the technical resources, we have a lot of topic collections, which are essentially annotated bibliographies of different topics in emergency preparedness focused on healthcare. We also have a lot of resources that are TRACIE developed, and the DASH tool is one of those amongst many. Our Assistance Center, if you're not finding what you need, you can get in touch with us, business hours, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. We will see what we can do to connect you with the subject matter experts, specific resources, and in some case, even develop resources to meet a given need. And that's how the DASH tool wound up coming about. Information exchange is a password protected area where our members can exchange information essentially together in real time without us having to go through any editing or vetting process. So if there's a rapidly evolving event, in the last time we had an Ebola outbreak was an example of that, where a lot of jurisdictions or individuals or facilities were sharing in real time examples of protocols, policies, and other things that allowed them to connect on a very immediate basis without ASPR TRACIE acting as an intermediary. Next slide. So the DASH tool was created in effect to answer the question, what do I need to have at my hospital on the shelf to be prepared for the 90% of contingencies that we're going to see, whether that's a burn event, mass casualty, special pathogens event. And we involved a number of partners, Healthcare Ready, HIDA, the Region 7, RDHRS, NETEC was, for sure technical advisors on, our special pathogens unit. And this built on a couple of existing tools. Next slide, please. So what we're trying to accomplish here is that you can go into a very easy to use Tableau framework and you put the characteristics of your facility in, you put in some of the characteristics that Jill talked about, how many staff are going to be in the room at the one time, with a special pathogens patient, the calculations you'll see us walk through, here in just a few minutes. And then the recommendations are generated in proportion to mass casualty events that the American College of Surgeons and others feels that hospitals of that size should be ready for. We do a lot with the assumptions that are built into PDFs that accompany each of the modules. So if you're interested in the background math about how we arrived at how many milligrams of morphine equivalents per hour a burn patient might need, you can go in there and find that out. But the calculators do the hard work for you. The updated link is available at the bottom there, although honestly, if you just type in DASH and TRACIE into a search bar, it's probably going to take you to the tool very quickly. And as mentioned in the chat, you will have access to the PDF of these slides for the links that I will show you later on. This is not a tool to reach for during a response. If you don't have it on the shelf at the time that a response begins, it's too late. So this is definitely a preparedness tool. Next slide, please. So there's 4 modules: the hospital pharmacy module, the personal protective equipment module that you're going to see demoed in a few minutes here, the burn supply module, and the trauma supply module. So you just click on the buttons to use each of these modules, and there is overlap. The hospital pharmacy module is going to assume that you're preparing based on the characteristics of your hospital for a certain number of burn casualties. So your fluids and analgesia and things like that are going to automatically be calculated there. For trauma and for burn, there's some overlap between some of the instruments and dressings. So there's an assumption that you're going to wind up using all of the modules. And we do see this as a holistic approach to hospital preparedness. Next slide, please. I expect you to read all of this here, so I'm going to give you a few minutes to do that. Sorry, kidding. But what you will see on the left-hand side is and this is what you see when you launch the module. There are instructions and methodology in the PDF, but we know that the vast majority of people don't read instructions even for chainsaws. So if you do go through this and just basically try to work your way through, it is relatively straightforward. This is an example here of how we're calculating sedatives. And so the pharmacy can basically put in what sedatives they have on the shelf. And on the lower right, you will see how those different types of sedatives and their quantities add up, and in this case are exceeding the predictive need, for sedatives based on the hospital of your size, type, role in the community, and whether or not there are other hospitals in the area. So in this case, for sedatives, this hospital is all good. Next slide, please. This is the burn, part of the burn supply module. Again, methodologies on the left. At the left bottom, if you scrolled, you would see more inputs for the type of burn facility, trauma facility, size of the hospital you are, et cetera. And here we're looking at topicals for burn treatment, whether that's bacitracin or a number of other products that can be applied. We have recommendations within the module for a certain amount of each because they do have a little bit different value in use in burn treatment. In some cases, burn centers will have a very strong preference for certain products, so working with them is also very important. And again, here on the right-hand side, on the far right of that bar graph, you'll see our predicted quantities for the different types of topicals we would recommend that that hospital has in stock. And then that other bar is basically what the hospital does have on hand. And again, they're exceeding expectations, so well played. Next slide, please. In the trauma supply module, rather than bar graphs, we're essentially generating a line item list and quantity for you. This incorporates assumptions about the number of pediatric victims and admittedly probably overestimates those a little bit in order that we don't run out of things like small endotracheal tubes when we need them. And basically, this is just a line list with assumptions built in about what percentage of the trauma patients need to be intubated, what percentage need chest tubes, et cetera. So hopefully this combined will be a very, very helpful tool for you in predicting, your supply needs at hospitals. What we found at our hospital for the pharmacy is it took about 2.5 hours to, put the inputs into the module and be able to get the outputs, which I work at a level 1 trauma center in downtown Minneapolis. The only thing that we really looked at that we were going to have a need potentially to stock up on was some of our anti-epileptics. So that was a good find and something that we could take back. And next module will be the PPE module. And I'll just comment on the PPE module. There are 3 components to that. There's the pandemic module, there's the special respiratory pathogen module, and the viral hemorrhagic fever module. We're not going to talk much about the pandemic module today, but I will say that the assumptions there are really critical about how long you're going to use N95 respirators, what type of gowns you work with, whether they're laundered or not, and whether or single use. And that will generate some fairly impressive numbers as far as the number of respirators, gowns, gloves, et cetera, that you will need for 6 months, 12 months, et cetera, for your hospital. But it was key to informing our facility, our supply chain, our executive leadership here just recently. And we decided to, even in the midst of this economic situation, spending an additional $30,000 to set aside N95 respirators that we can then rotate through stock, which will give us some additional cushion. And now we know basically what is on the shelf and how long we have to work with in case there's a pandemic or a supply chain interruption or some other issue, and we're going to be relying on our cash supplies. So it's important to take these in context. It might be that your hospital is across the street from a major chemical weapons manufacturing facility, in which case you have to take the community context into account when you're planning for what to have on the shelf. So discussion with community partners, with your supply chain partners to make sure you're thinking through, are there issues that are going to result in interruption of delivery? It's one thing if you've got a regional distribution warehouse a mile away versus 100 miles away. And also, what is the risk of a major infrastructure damaging event occurring, whether that's an earthquake, hurricane, things like that? That may definitely affect your conclusions here. Some of that is built into the tool, but you definitely want to take the community context into account. So adjusting those plans and adjusting the outputs based on your HVA, based on what you know about the region and your supply chains is important. We've tried to incorporate some of those issues, but there are definitely others. We have a wealth of DASH-related resources through ASPR TRACIE, a guide to the website, an introductory video, frequently asked questions. We'll walk you through a demonstration of the DASH tool, and then an introduction to the DASH tool webinar that we recorded. So again, these links will be available in the PDF to come. Next slide, please. And you may also find on TRACIE some related resources, whether it's our infectious diseases resources page or our medical product shortages and scarce resources page that definitely tie into some of the things we'll be talking about today. So with that, on behalf of ASPR TRACIE, Jill, I just want to say thanks so much for the opportunity to be here. And I hope that, our viewers will find the DASH tool helpful, specifically for PPE as we're talking about today, but I hope that they will explore and encourage their hospitals to utilize the other modules, ensuring that we have a good amount of supplies on the shelf, whenever an incident would strike.
Thank you so much, John. I think it's absolutely true that for me, the DASH tool has been something that's been sort of a fun rabbit hole to go down. I laughed out loud comment about chainsaws, but I think that as you said, it becomes good talking points with our leadership, with our supply chain folks to talk about what we need to have and what we need to think about having. I think most of us by now realize that we don't get much warning when things are about to go bad. So being
absolutely.
prepared, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one of the things too is that by putting numbers in front of, pharmacy or hospital leadership, it makes them accountable for deciding potentially not to purchase, additional supplies if they make that choice, that at least we can illustrate the consumption, the risks, and, specifically what is needed for a certain period of time. So appreciate that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much. And we'll have those resources again for the ones that John just showed so that you guys will be able to copy that down if you did not get them off that slide. I'm really thrilled that to help us walk through some of these real life scenarios, we have two folks with us, and we're going to start with Sarah Haroth. Sarah has been a nurse for 18 years, and she's the patient care supervisor and unit educator for M Health Fairview University of Minnesota Medical Center Special Pathogens Unit. She's also with Brooke and I on the PPE working group and has just been a wonderful spark there at Minnesota. And we're really thrilled that she's going to be here today and walk us through live some scenarios for how to use the DASH tool. So welcome, Sarah. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much, Jill. I appreciate that. And I know it's a mouthful of saying my title, so I appreciate that. So we'll start this and we'll go to the next slide, please. Okay, so in just a moment, we are going to navigate to the Health and Human Services website. And as we do this, there's a couple different tabs we'll go through, but within the overarching Department of Human and Health Services, there is the Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response. And then underneath that is where we're going to find our tools that we're going to use, just like Dr. Hick was talking about. So the Technical Resources Assistance Center and Information Exchange. Okay, so we will do this live, but you would navigate to the Technical Resources, which is beautifully labeled #1. And then we'll go to the Personal Protective Equipment, or as many of us just call it PPE, #2. And then I'm actually going to show you slightly below that there is a really nice handout that has instructions, but this module, ASPR TRACIE, really designed this to be very user-friendly. My first time through, I actually, full disclosure, I didn't use the instructions and I just decided to kind of monkey through myself, but I was able to find the information I needed and then validate it with everything there. So it's very true, I didn't use the instructions. Okay. So the DASH tool, as John was saying, is really just meant to be, what is the basic kind of things I need to level set and just be prepared. Something to really keep in mind is looking at what your institution already utilizes. So that really can kind of help save on some costs. So if your institution doesn't have a policy or a really need to use coveralls, is it really the best interest to go down that for something that might expire by the time you need to go and use it? So our healthcare institution, we utilize level 4 gowns, and that is something we can source across any one of our healthcare hospitals within our organization. And then this is also really customizable for the number of your staff. Like Jill was saying, you are going to set the tone and you know what your unit needs. You know what your staff need in terms of how many people can I actually place into a room? Who can I have on standby? If I'm one of the organizations like a level 2 or level 3 facility that can do some samples and running tests, do I have that person go into the room, or is my bedside staff skilled enough where they could retrieve that? Are they still in the emergency department? A lot of the emergency room nurses can draw labs if they are trained to do so. Maybe that's one less person we don't need to have in that space. So really kind of sitting down with whoever these decision makers are and really kind of understanding who are the best people to be in that room while also keeping their risk down and being really well protected. And another thing that this tool doesn't cover, but is absolutely crucial, you'll notice that last bullet point. So it doesn't talk about the infection prevention control things that we always use. Our hand sanitizer, whatever your institution uses for its cleaning product, where it's a disinfectant wipe or it's some kind of solution that you're using. And if you're using PPE for certain sterile procedures. So those are not listed in the tool. This is really just your N95s. These are your gowns, your gloves, really the key things that every single person going into that room is going to need. Perfect. So Jill did a fantastic job kind of giving some high levels of the NSPS, or the National Special Pathogen System. So really what this looks like is it's a hub and spoke model. So NETEC is really the coordinating body, and then they branch out to the level ones, which are the regional emerging special pathogen and treatment centers, or we like to call it a RESPECT. So we do a lot of the trainings, we do outreach, which in our FEMA organizations, we also kind of share best practices and promising things that are coming down the pipeline that we've seen. And really we kind of set the tone for what response looks like within our institutions. Level 2 facilities, they are special pathogen treatment centers. So these institutions can care for a patient for the duration of their illness. And then level 3s and 4s are meant to provide more short-term but specialized care. So a level 4 that Jill was referring to is any point of entry. That could be an urgent care, that could be an ambulatory care clinic, it could be labor and delivery of a laboring patient coming in. A lot of us think of the emergency room, but it also could be maybe your EMS crew is going out and picking somebody up. What does that PPE look like? We also have to think through disposal as well. Okay, so we're gonna have fun in just a second. So we are gonna first go to the viral hemorrhagic fever module. Okay, we're gonna do a level 2 scenario. So we'll go very shortly over like what those expectations are of a level 2 facility. And then we will have a scenario and use the DASH tool live. Okay, so your organization is caring for one adult patient who tested positive for Lassa fever after traveling to Sierra Leone. The patient was bitten by a rat, and their current symptoms include headache, vomiting, fever, and fatigue. So I've highlighted the level 2 column in the middle, and we can see that we are meant to care for 1 to 2 viral hemorrhagic fevers or 4 airborne patients. So for my PPE supplies right underneath, I am meant to make sure I have at least 7 days on site with plans to care for this patient for about 21 days. So below, it kind of talks about how much you should be training, how people should be validating their PPE. But we're going to go see what does 7 days of PPE actually look like. So I'm going to take this and share my screen. Okay, there we go. So now we have navigated to the Department of Health and Human Services website. We are going to go under the technical resources, and then under the resources page, there's the DASH tool. You can click right on that. And then this is where Dr. Hick was talking about. We have the hospital pharmacy, the personal protective equipment, we've got the burn supply and the trauma. So if we click on the personal protective equipment, I'm going to slowly scroll down because I know sometimes I get a headache. This right here are your instructions. I have fabulously kind of pulled them up, but on the left-hand side, you've got a beautiful navigation tab. It really walks you through every single question you're going to be asked. I think it's a really nice resource. You can expand them. So it tells you exactly what you're going to do, but so does the website. So we're going to leave this alone. It's just a resource, and we will go ahead and slide on down. We're going to go to our viral hemorrhagic fever. I'm going to click on that. Okay. So this says we've got our viral hemorrhagic fever predictor. And again, you don't have to know everything. On the left-hand side, it really tells you a lot of the information you need to know. So what type of facility are you? So a level 2 is a special pathogen treatment center. So it tells me I need to be looking for 7 days. You can do this one of two ways. You can certainly grab and drag. I tend to get overzealous with my dragging, so I just use the arrow up feature. For me, that works better, but it's whatever works for you. And then this, how many isolation rooms are you capable of staffing? So we just have one patient, so that's what I'm planning for. I'm going to go ahead and use my healthcare organizations, and we utilize gowns, so that is what I'm choosing. And then we are going to go ahead and choose our PAPR. So we've already got that pre-selected for us. So one thing to think about is underneath here, step number 4 says, if you're using PAPRs, you want to think about, are these single use for your facility? So ours, we have decided, yes, our hoods are single use and our tubing is single use. Filters we would use again. And then how many PAPR filters per 1 unit? We just have 1. Once you have your information filled out for this first section, you're going to scroll down until you see the blue arrows, and we're going to navigate to the staffing section. Now, this really is what your healthcare organization has deemed that this is what we're going to support in terms of our staff. So there are a lot of assumptions made. I won't say a lot, but there's a few on this. And the one I want to call out right in the middle is these are really calling out for 12-hour shifts. So if your healthcare organization does 8 hours, you could certainly kind of plan on increasing it. But then once you've run it for the 12 hours, then you might have to do a little bit more math to get your actual needs. But I don't think it ever hurts to have a little bit extra on hand. And then what does your patient care look like? Is this person critical where you need 2 nurses or staff in that room? Are you going to have a provider go into that room at least once a shift? Outside that room, if you've got an attached anteroom for your viral hemorrhagic fever patient, do you have somebody that's in an additional set of PPE that is watching you don, helping you, walking you through the doffing process, able to kind of be a responder if something dramatic happens, they can go right in and there's no delay. Your healthcare organization really needs to decide, are you going to have your environmental services staff involved in cleaning this patient room? Or is this something that's going to default to the nursing staff? I can speak to my organization. We default to the nursing staff. Our environmental services team will clean kind of just the green spaces in our hallways, but really the patient care in our ante rooms are cleaned by our staff. So I'm going to remove this. And then another one, do you have lab staff going in there? Do you actually have, if you're a different facility, like a level 2 that we're talking about, do you have your own lab that's set up? So yep, we have our own lab and they would be in PPE running these tests. And then do you have somebody else? Like, is there someone who can run and get supplies? Or if you've got your hazardous waste, how are you handling that? Do you have an autoclave? Or is this, trash? A lot of things to kind of think about. And then in that 12 hours, how many times are they going in that room? So we'll increase this a little bit. That way we give our staff a little bit more break and we can rotate them through. So in 12 hours, yep, I hope I just have one person. And I like to match my nursing and my donning partners. So that way I have the same number. And then we'll update. I didn't do EVS. Then we'll leave these numbers the same. And again, a lot of this is just going to be driven by your institution, what you're comfortable doing, and then also kind of what you've come to an agreement on. And I hit my button, navigate. There we go. So this is going to give you just kind of quick review of what you put in. And it's going to give you a high level. So it's saying you need 2 pairs. what I want to kind of call up here is this blue link. What this chart below is saying is that it's telling you that your nursing staff, this program is assuming you're changing your gloves at least 3 times during that period. And that's just by the nursing staff, 1 glove by EVS. So it really kind of gives you a bunch of information as to how they're coming up with these numbers below. So even though I had 4 staff, they're calculating a little bit differently. And then once I get to the end, a couple things I think are super important. One is this is really great information to kind of bring to your leadership and help the people who are making those decisions. So you've got everything listed out. You may not be using everything. So we obviously have zeros in the N95. I didn't need that. I don't have a face shield. You've got your grand totals at the bottom. What is different about this is once you have run this specific module, your numbers are not going to save. So once you navigate off of this or you reset it, these numbers go away. So I really like to take a screenshot because sometimes I want to know, okay, what if I have enough? What if I prepped for, 10 days? Where does that put me at? And then partnering with my supply chain contacts, what does that cost look like if I were to do the same thing but with coveralls? And so you can have many different scenarios and play with different staffing levels to really fine tune what does my best plan for my healthcare organization look like. So hopefully the viral hemorrhagic fever just kind of example was helpful. And there's 2 things we're going to do. So we're going to quick go to another example. This one is going to be novel respiratory. So we will go there. I apologize. You're going to quick little change in view here. All right, I thought it was going to change. So we have got our organization is caring for 2 pediatric and 2 adult patients who tested positive for Middle East Respiratory Syndrome or MERS. And they recently traveled as a group to the Hajj and are on their return trip back, they started experiencing shortness of breath, cough, and fever. So again, we're at our level 2. We know we can care for up to 4. That's certainly within ours, and we're going to do 7 days. So navigating back to our dash PPE tool, you don't have to hit back and go all the way back and start fresh. What you can actually do, I apologize for the scrolling, is you can go back to your index page, and that's going to give you the option to start again. You can either run a new one or you can now go to our respiratory illness. And again, very similar. We've got our scroll bar on the right. We've got our instructions on the left. And then we're going to go through and start doing a couple examples. So PPE, we've got 14. And this one I'll go a little bit differently. I'll kind of go through it quicker. Okay, we've got that. And I talk to myself. Hopefully I'm not the only one in this group that talks to themselves. Okay.
I'm sure you're not, Sarah. You're doing fine.
You know what? Great minds talk to themselves, I think, because then you're talking to an expert. Okay, so we've got 4 peppers, hoods. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So we'll just kind of navigate through this. So just to kind of get some numbers, you've got different things in here. It really dramatically changes depending on how long you're going for and how many rooms you're staffing, just to give a quick snapshot. But I'm going to go ahead and hand this back over. So thank you so much for your time, and I'm going to hand it over to Brooke.
Thanks, Sarah. That was great. It is nice to see it just walked through step by step. So we really appreciate that. I am grateful to introduce a friend of mine, Brooke Henriksen. Brooke is the co-lead, the co-conspirator with me as PPE lead for NETEC. Brooke is the training and education coordinator for the special pathogens program in Region 10, which is Providence Sacred Heart Medical Center and Children's Hospital in Spokane, Washington. She's co-chair, as I said, of the PPE work group and a member of the NETEC biocontainment or BCU work group as well. So Brooke, thanks for being here and for leading us through a level 3 scenario.
Excellent. Thank you, Jill. Could I get the next slide, please? All right, so we've heard a couple of different people today talking about the NETEC National Special Pathogen System. I just want to quickly highlight we're all level 4s, but some of us may be even a higher level based on designation. So I'm from a facility that is currently a level 1 respect that Sarah spoke to. So I don't want to go into much more detail on this because we've heard it a couple of times. So next slide, please. So the capabilities I'm going to talk about today are specifically for a level 3. So a level 3 facility is, again, it's designated. You don't have to be a level 3. It is something that you would maybe raise your hand for, and then you take a look at these capabilities and say, okay, this is where we would like to land. So the care duration is 12 to 36 hours, and this is more specific to a viral hemorrhagic fever type patient. If it's a novel respiratory patient, your hospital's risk assessment would need to determine if you're going to send that patient out or if you're going to maintain them for the duration of illness. That's totally on your facility's risk assessments. Capacity for a viral hemorrhagic fever, we're talking about 1 isolation space. And the PPE supply would be roughly for 3 VHF patients that you could potentially care for 12 to 36 hours. I think what I want to highlight to that is a 12-hour transfer out of a level 3 facility to a higher level of care is a pretty quick transfer depending on where you are in the country. I'm from Region 10, so some of our level 3 facilities are several hours away from either another level 2 or a level 1. So you may need to be looking at more like that longer duration as far as 36 hours or maybe even up to 2 days, depending on where you are, how you're located within your facility and within your region. So we're going to talk about a novel respiratory pathogen or a special respiratory pathogen right now. And I think those fall under, as Sarah discussed, either a MERS patient or maybe, as Jill mentioned, it's a novel influenza patient. Within this link, when you get these, the link for the ASPR TRACIE dash tools will work, so you'll be able to navigate directly to them. And I'm going to go ahead and take over sharing at this point. And I'm going to go ahead and go to the ASPR TRACIE dash tool. What I found, we all navigate differently with our computers, and I just like to Google exactly what I'm looking for. So if you type in dash in all capitals tool, it will bring you right to this page is what I found. So then you can go right into the PPE module. And I'm going to scroll down. And Sarah's already discussed the instructions and the methodology PDFs that are available to you to help you navigate the module. I'm not going to go through them right now. We're not going to hit the pandemic. I think we've all are still recovering from that. So we're going to go right into the special respiratory illness. Some facilities may have a difference in not just their PPE, but as I discussed earlier, how close are you to a higher level of care? How close is your facility to a higher level of care? So if I'm a level 3, I'm going to, I think, be really looking at maybe keeping a patient for up to 2 days. So the isolation room, I'm going to say my facility only has 1, and I'm going to go a little bit different because I know some facilities are PAPR centric, but some facilities are N95s. So if you're going to go with an N95 centric, that's going to change some things. And we're going to let that go ahead and think about the N95s. We're not going to need to worry about the tubing, the hoods, or how many filters in this particular scenario. I'm going to scroll over. And now as far as nursing staff, some facilities may want to limit as many people as they can going into a room, especially if it's an illness that you're not familiar with. So you may just have a physician and a nurse. And if you're a small facility, that may be even more prevalent. So I've got where our environmental staff at this point are not going to go in. Our nurses are going to do our lab draws. So we're not going to have a lab tech, and we're going to limit any other staff going into this room. Again, nursing room entries, I think that's going to very much depend on your patient condition, how many patients you have. The physician, we said, was going to make 1 entry into the room. I'm going to go ahead and change our environmental person going in as to 0 because we're not going to use them in this particular scenario. I'm going to also change the lab tech, and I'm going to change other staff entries to 0 as well. And again, this is very customizable, so you may have a very different scenario. I'm going to scroll back up. We're just going to real quickly, these are the assumptions that are being made by each of these different PPE pieces. So right now we're looking at some long cuff gloves for the nurses and the physician. What I noticed when I've gone through these slides is this area for the environmental services, the lab tech and the other staff, it does show that it's taking into the considerations for the numbers, but this is just a summary. And when you come over and you want to get your final totals, you'll see that these areas are now back to 0. So this is what we're looking for grand totals of N95s, gloves. In our N95s, you can see for a 2-day, you're looking at up to 20 N95s. And I think that is, again, it's just a baseline, right? This is just a stepping off point. You can certainly look at other facility or other numbers based on your risk assessments. I'm going to go ahead and click this back to the scenario page. I'm going to go on to my second scenario. Navigating live is always interesting, isn't it? All right. So for a viral hemorrhagic patient, we're going to say you've got one patient that presented to your level 3 department. They've got nausea, malaise, and joint pain. They are very forthcoming, and they let you know ahead of time that, or at that moment that they present, that they have actually traveled to a known Marburg outbreak within a country that is a concern. So I'm going to go ahead and share what that would look like. So again, we're at the very front page of the Dash tool, and there's different modules. We're going to go into the PPE module. I'm going to scroll down to viral hemorrhagic fever. And we're now only we're a level 3, so we're hoping to only keep the patient for 24 hours. And again, I think that is very determined on where you are in your region. How close are you to another higher level of care? I'm going to say we only have one isolation room. We are going to use gowns, and we're going to go ahead and go back to the N95 scenario. So we don't need to deal with the PAPR scenario in this particular example. So this is where we can change how many. We've got one nurse going in the room. And if it's a viral hemorrhagic fever, you may have 2 nurses that are potentially swapping out roles. A lot of facilities limit how long patient or nurses and staff are in their PPE based on how they're able to tolerate it. So we're going to make sure that we have our trained observer. I'm going to again take this down to no staff other than the nurse and the provider going into the room. And this is all, again, customizable. And let it load. Okay. So this is kind of the summary per shift. And now this is going to be the summary for the duration of your care for the patient. And in this particular scenario, it was just for 24 hours. What I like about it is when you plug in the N95s, it automatically plugs in your head cover and your face shield. All right, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go back and I will stop sharing. And Benjamin, if you could bring up my last slide. Excellent. So we've talked about a couple of scenarios with the Dash tool. The last thing I want to really talk about is a new asset, that resource that the NETEC has just put out. It's called Know Your PPE. So if you're still trying to figure out what PPE ensemble you're looking at, this is a great resource. The link is live. It will go over some specifics for a novel respiratory pathogen, as well as a dry suspect case of VHF or a wet or confirmed suspect case of VHF. It's a great resource, and I think it'll be very helpful used in partnership with this DASH tool.
Thanks, Brooke. So I know that we are running very short of time, so I want to address just a few questions. First of all, of course, thank you to our panelists today. Just a lot of great information. I want to reiterate a couple things that I know that came up. This DASH tool you can download, as John pointed out, you can download as a PDF your data. You can screenshot, as Sarah pointed out. But this data does not go to ASPR or to your coalition. It is not going to somehow send up the bat signal that you need help. This is for planning. So I really want to emphasize that while this is great information, it's great information for you to use, for your facility to use, and perhaps in conjunction with other hospitals in your healthcare coalition or your region to plan for how you might all deal with needing more PPE or needing PPE for more than, for instance, 7 days or even 21 days. So really important that you understand that this is a tool, but that it's not magic. We wish we had the PPE wand, but I don't think there is one. All right, so I have a couple of the questions I just would love to sort of lob y'all's way. One of them to Brooke and Sarah is about what people wear underneath their PPE. I mean, like, what should they be planning on? And I want to emphasize that for these situations, we're really talking about like the ED staff, probably not the folks that have already decided they're going to have a biocontainment unit, because that's folks that have probably already thought about what they're wearing underneath.
Yeah, I think that's been a big question that we've seen come around, and it's like, do we need to buy disposable scrubs or disposable something for our caregivers underneath these for the PPE? And I think that's just based on a risk assessment for your facility. Our facility does not provide disposable scrubs. Our biocontainment unit, we do provide scrubs for our caregivers, but I think in an ER situation, we know this PPE works. We trust the PPE, and I think you can, when you're using the PPE that is appropriate for your scenario, that they can wear scrubs. And I think, again, you may choose to do something different. I don't think that's necessarily wrong, but I think they can be in the scrubs that they're wearing.
John Hick here, they might just want to consider if their scrubs are personal scrubs, as are worn in some emergency departments, it would be good to have a supply of hospital supplied and laundered scrubs so that they don't have to wear those and then, wear them for the duration of the shift and home.
Yep, great options there. Thank you for that. One of the other things that I think is important to understand about this is that for some of our PPE items, they have a shelf life. They have an expiration. So Sarah or Brooke or John, can we sort of list off some of the things we know have some expiration dates or some at least typical shelf life expiry sort of information about these? Otherwise, I'll jump in. Go ahead, Sarah.
No, that's fair. So something that our organization uses is our level 4 surgical gowns. So those typically for us, we're looking at anywhere from a 4-year expiration, but I work very closely with our supply chain to make sure if we're getting close to that, we're rotating them out and everything. If our unit or we've got carts in our emergency departments that are like ready to go kits that have things in there, they're getting checked monthly by our infection prevention team to make sure we're not going to expire. We get those products rotated out. Gloves are another one. We know they're manufactured, but maybe they don't have a great expiration, but after 3 years, they do start breaking down. So gloves is another one to think about. Face shields don't have it. But if you notice any sort of discoloration, please discard them and get a new one. You need to be able to see what you're doing very clearly. N95 masks, same thing. Make sure you're being fit tested for the appropriate one every single year when it comes up. So those are just a couple of things that come to my mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, perfect. I know that. Go ahead, John.
The elastic tends to break down sometimes on the bands for both the face shields and the respirators. So just kind of keeping that in mind, and also keeping in mind an option with your distributors. Ask them if they're willing to do a vendor managed inventory if you are not able to rotate the amount of stuff that you think you're going to need through stock. They may be able to help you if you purchase and then set that aside. They can rotate that to multiple customers, over the course of time.
Absolutely. And I think it is important, even things like coveralls, non-sterile isolation gowns. Coveralls typically have maybe a 10-year shelf life, but that's going to be impacted greatly by the storage conditions. So high humidity, high temperature, lots of light, all of those things affect the quality of these products. So really, this is a group project to figure out how you're going to handle this with your supply chain, with where your storage is, and things like how you might be able to rotate these to keep your staff competent and to do training and to make them available, and then making sure that you're not just warehousing things that end up not being useful when you finally need them. If you have any further questions, I know we're just over the top of the hour, please feel free to submit them through the Zoom. We will keep that live for another couple of minutes. I want to thank again our panelists and thank you all for attending. We will be able to release some more questions and answers as part of a blog post that we'll do on netec.org. So please, if you have suggestions or questions or comments, you can submit them here or always at NETEC, netec.org, info@netec.org. And we really appreciate your attention and the effort you're taking to move your facility toward better preparedness. So thank you guys for everything. Thank you for walking us through this dash tool, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. Y'all have a great day.